Look to this day, for it is life, the very life of life. In its brief course lie all the realities and truths of existence, the joy of growth, the splendor of action, the glory of power. For yesterday is but a memory, and tomorrow is only a vision. But today, well lived, makes every yesterday a memory of happiness, and every tomorrow a vision of hope. Look well, therefore, to this day.
Okay, take 2. Didn't know if you wanted headphones or not. So here we go.
So welcome to the Unitarian Church of Baton Rouge. My name is Nathan. I'm your senior minister. Eric Poza, our interim minister, is with us on chat, along with Kathy Smith. Lee's on piano and made a lot of the music happen. There's a whole bunch of people. Happy Easter. We're glad you're with us. If you are a visitor, we're especially glad that you're here. You can find out more by getting on our email list. That's the key. If you do nothing else this Easter as it relates to finding out more about this church, get on that email list. The only news we have for you is that the congregational meeting will be April 18th, and we need a quorum for that. There will be an info session on April 11th, so mark your calendars for those. And this will be my last Sunday with you for a month. I'm taking a mini sabbatical. You will be in very capable hands, more capable than probably right now, but that's another story. But you'll be in very capable hands. I'll miss you. But we'll be back. The other thing to pay attention to, we'll talk about this later in the service, we will meet outside in person when we get below 10 cases per 100,000 for 6 days straight. We haven't hit that since October, but if we meet that threshold, we'll start doing outdoor supplemental worship. We're still prioritizing the online. So keep your eye out for that. Glad you're with us. Welcome on this Easter Sunday. So welcome to Easter Sunday at our church. So there's I've talked about this before, but I think there's a natural liturgical arc to the year. So I think that December, Christmas time, the time when light is missing from the world, there's a lot of need for hope, for example. And so I think we overlaid a holiday like Christmas onto it. In theory, if you're suffering from depression, either clinical or just struggling with how hard the world is right now, spring is supposed to be the time that you feel better. See, there's a bunch of flowers, everyone's doing better. But if you're not, spring is actually a really depressing time. So it makes sense that we overlay a holiday like Easter onto spring. So what I'm saying is there's this arc for the whole year that we are in sync with religiously and liturgically. But this year feels out of sync. So I want to give you a demonstration. So I sat by my flowers, not just because Easter, for some reason, we always have to have flowers, but these are my azaleas. They're in bloom. But I want you to look. These flowers right here, they bloomed in December. Out of season. These came in season. The azalea bush knows something's weird. Last year, I didn't notice a substantial azalea season. They all seem to bloom in a weird kind of way. And this year, it doesn't feel like Easter to me. It feels like Advent, which is the theme. We're doing Easter as Advent. And what I mean by that is, in the liturgical sense, Easter, so Jesus was born, he lived his life, he had his ministry, and his ministry gave lots of people hope. They thought there's going to be a more just world coming, but the state killed him. He was executed for being a radical. And Easter is the celebration that even death cannot kill hope or justice or love. And actually, if you look at the oldest gospel, the Gospel of Mark, Jesus doesn't get resurrected. He just disappears. So the three women go to the tomb, they open the tomb, it's empty. And all the scripture says is they were afraid and told no one. A few hundred years later, they added on a resurrection story in Mark. Luke and Matthew have resurrection, but not Mark. So this is supposed to be a triumphant day. It doesn't feel so triumphant because we're not there yet. There's supposed to be another surge of this of the virus. And I don't feel like we're ready to get out there into the world right now. We're out of sync. The flowers again. We're out of sync with where we should be. This feels more like Advent. Advent is the season of hope. So during Advent, you know that birth is coming. You know the birth of a new generation, the birth of Jesus, the birth of someone or a generation who's going to fix all the things we couldn't fix. And so you're in a period of waiting. And so this Easter as Advent feels like we are in a period of waiting. So just like this flower, which doesn't exactly know which season we're in, I don't know which season we're in. So today we're going to hear stories of resurrections of hope, knowing that hope is a little further away than we normally would say it is. We'll get there, but we're just not there yet. We're still waiting. So you can still sign up if you would like to place stones for people in America who died from the coronavirus. We have 212 jars already out of the 300 we have to fill. So there's still plenty of opportunity. It's a very moving spiritual practice, and we in the church think that everyone who died, there's one stone for each person who died in this country from the virus. And we think that each person needs to be remembered at least one more time in this very strange time. We have 2 stones to place today. Both are for deaths of family members of church members. One is for Melanie Pryor's aunt, and one is for Sarah Bound's cousin, Ricky Collins. Now is the time that normally we would invite you up to place stones, either along the east or the west wall. I will place them in your place. Please add them to the chat however you see fit. I now invite you to come forward as we place stones. If you have your chalice at home, I invite you to light it with me. With hope to make this a better world, we light this flame. Its light is a symbol of the power of love.
It is easy to associate this time of year, this time of Easter, with flowers, and particularly with wildflowers. Some of this, oddly, is a legacy of Lady Bird Johnson, the former First Lady of the United States. She was instrumental in getting past that Keep America Beautiful Act in the mid-1960s, which, among other things, allowed for and provided for the planting of wildflowers along roadsides across the country. This played out in a particular way in Lady Bird Johnson's home state and my home state of Texas, where the bluebonnets, the state flower, which are not common in other parts of the country, became ubiquitous in their blooming every spring and became something of a rite of passage for a lot of Texas families. The practice of stopping by the roadside and placing your children in the field of bluebonnets to get their photos is very common where I'm from. It does, though, play out in different ways in other places. What I associated first with Louisiana when I lived here before, almost 20 years ago, was the azalea bushes. Not the roadside flowers, but the neighborhood bushes of azaleas, which I experienced that first time as blooming dramatically and all at once. That didn't exactly happen, of course, but I happened to travel out of town in mid-March for a long weekend back home to visit family. And when I left, everything was starting to turn green again, but the flowers hadn't bloomed. Well, most of them bloomed in those 72 hours or so that I was gone, so that when I returned, all of a sudden the neighborhood near the Garden District where I stayed at the time was just awash in this bright, colorful stretches of azalea bushes that were blooming vibrantly. It was a wonderful and a dramatic memory that stuck with me ever since. But with this association, there's a question to ask ourselves, whether it's the right association to have. You see, there's a story implied, a message implied, I should say, by the blooming of the wildflowers or the azalea bushes every spring, every March or so. And it's a message of eternal return, of ongoing cycles of birth, death, rebirth with the seasons. That is a good message, an important message. In many situations, it's the right message. But the message of Easter, that's different. Because eternal return was not in the cards at all with the Easter story. The story of the death of Jesus brought with it a meaning for the disciples of Jesus that it was all over. That Good Friday message of the crucifixion gave all of the followers of Jesus every reason to think that their movement had just come to a dramatic end with the death of its leader. And they could see no way forward. And then suddenly, Jesus was back. Jesus had been resurrected. And nobody had expected it, even though he'd, in many of the stories, told them that it was going to happen. Still, none of them truly expected it. The Easter message is not a message of eternal return. It's a message of the return of that which we have no reason to expect is going to return. It's a message of surprise, a message of dramatic and unexpected rebirth, of the return of that which we had every reason to think was lost. To put it in terms of the flowers, it's not the story of the bluebonnets blooming along the Texas roadsides every spring, but it might be the story of the year that there was a severe drought in their winter, and we had good reason to wonder whether there were going to be many bluebonnets at all, and not only did they bloom, but they bloomed early that year. Or perhaps here, this year, it's the story of a severe winter storm in February, which leads us to wonder how many of our plants were going to survive. And still the azalea bushes bloomed dramatically. A couple of weeks ago, I took an afternoon with my wife to drive through the Garden District and just marvel at a wash of color that was blooming all around us just a month after that strong winter storm that had us wondering whether anything was going to bloom this spring. Wonder how much we would have lost. And finding we had lost far less than we had thought and feared. That's the message of hope resurrecting. Because we didn't necessarily expect it was going to, and it did anyway. That message is what drives me forward. Even when I'm losing hope, because I recognize the times that I have been and may continue to be wrong to have lost hope. And that's good news indeed.
I invite you into a moment of prayer and reflection. The God that we know when we see family and kindness and compassion, be with us on this day. And hold all those who are ready for hope, who are ready for a more kind, a more just world. Help us to grieve all those we haven't been able to grieve yet. Help us to celebrate today the gift of being alive. Help us become beacons of hope and love for a world that needs it. May we know peace. May we know love. Amen.
This morning I went out on the church grounds. I was hoping for flowers, not just any flowers, but specifically for daffodils. The first 2 years I was here, the preschool classes planted daffodils outside under 2 of our trees. Last year there were daffodil blossoms. I was hoping that this year there would be blossoms and I could film this reflection next to them. Except there aren't any. There are tons of clover and these little yellow flowers that I don't even know the name of. There's a row of goldenrod across the back fence. There are these spiky palm leaves around the base of the tree and a vine growing up the tree, and the tall, narrow leaves of the daffodil plants bending and bobbing in the wind, but no sunny yellow daffodil cups. And oddly enough, that does not lessen my feeling of hope, because it isn't the individual flower that gives me hope. It is the collective hope that just as the sap rises and the birds migrate from the south to the north and back again, that the life energy that is the natural world will rise and renew and regenerate. The greater hope I feel is not in the individual, but in the collective. It has been that way in springtime, anywhere I have lived in the world, year after year. One plant may wither or thrive, but the larger landscape will fill with green leaves and flowers. Even after a disaster, a fire, a storm, a virus, the pollution that comes with human interaction and industrialization, nature itself will regenerate and renew over time. The small individual things are like rewards. The bird nesting in the tree outside my window, the wiggly tadpoles that will turn into frogs by summer. Even the herbs in my flower pots that will burst into growth if I remember to water them. But it is the larger rhythm of the natural world that gives me the inner strength to keep moving forward, that sustains my hope. The knowing that beyond human effort, the stars will hang in the sky, the world will turn, the seasons will change, the sap will rise, the green leaves will blow in the wind against the brightness of the sky.
I can't tell you the number of people who've asked, when is the church opening up? When is it opening up? So I just thought we should use a little bit of Easter to talk about it. So the first thing you should know is we have a COVID safety team. They are evaluating and putting together a plan on when the church will open. They're doing this based on data. They will then present that plan to the board for approval. What we have right now is at any point for 1 week, if we get below 10 cases per 100,000, we use covidactnow.org, which is puts us in yellow. But so if we are at 10 cases per 100,000 or below that for 6 days straight, we will do outdoor worship. We have not met that threshold since September or October of last year. Once we meet that threshold, then we will start looking at what is the threshold for us to go back together in person. Some of the deeper questions that this congregation has to wrestle with. Do we get together before everyone has access to the vaccine? Because if that's the case, we're not getting together for another year. Children don't get the vaccine it's not approved for them. And the earliest I've heard predictions is December or January. Do we get together in ways that keep people distant without singing? Do we do it with singing? Do we do more outdoor stuff? There's a lot of things we're contemplating. And we're not there yet, and the numbers haven't even allowed us. We're not behind on the numbers because the numbers have been too high. The other thing that worries me is they're predicting a fourth surge now. It's already happened in the Northeast and some of the Midwest, and they're hoping enough people can get vaccinated before that surge comes. It's not here right now, and I hope I'm wrong. I hope that we start doing in-person outside and then we go indoors. But if the surge comes, we're going to have to wait even longer. And I know everyone else is meeting. I know all the other churches are meeting in person. I've gotten ads for the Easter services from just about every church in town about meeting in person. It is hard. It is really hard to be a minister in a church where I can't see you or be with you or minister to you. It is very hard to spend 2-3 times as long building these services that are not as good as us meeting together in person. It is uncomfortable and I don't like it. And I am proud to be a part of a church that can say during this pandemic, we did not make other people sick. That we put our own comfort and safety, or our own comfort and desires on hold for the greater good. And that is what Unitarian Universalism should be. So the resurrection of hope, the Easter is Advent, to tie all this together, is that we will get together in person as soon as we can do so without it hurting other people or making them sick. We're getting closer. We gotta wait. Advent, we gotta wait. Some of the things that normally you would get to see, but you didn't see because of this. Yesterday we had an Easter egg hunt. So kids came to the church. They actually signed up for time slots. They got their eggs out in our grass. It was a great time. So the church is still doing adapted ministry as best we can. Offering giving is way down. Pledging is up, so your intent to give is still there, but the sort of spontaneous giving is down. So I'm going to ask you right now, it's Easter, go on our website, or Kathy's going to post a whole bunch of ways that you can give. Go ahead and give, but for every $1 you give to this offering, find some organization that you think needs some money and give them twice as much as you give us. Every institution that I know of is struggling in some way. This church is very lucky. So go spread this joy to as many people as you can. This morning's offering will now be generously given and received.
Hello, dear friends. I want to tell you a little bit about how seminary is set up. That the way Meadville Lombard works is that they assign all of the readings and the reflections and assignments and all of that. They assign all of that early in the semester, and then you just kind of work on your own until towards the end of the semester, we all go up together to Chicago and we have a 1-week intensive, and it is intensive. That's all of the class time that we get together. So for my very first class at seminary, I was all excited, because I'm starting a new career and something that means so much to me. And the readings and some of the assignments I struggled with because some of the readings were really intellectual and very academic, and I didn't quite know what to think, but I'm pretty confident in myself. I'm going to do just fine, And I get there to class at the end of the semester, and it was difficult. The professor is a very intellectual, academic philosopher, theologian, and I really struggled in the class while we were there together, and I was listening to my colleagues, my classmates, and some of the stuff they were saying in response to the teacher. I didn't understand either, and I was worried. I didn't know if I belonged there. Like, had I made a mistake? Is this not going to work? I was feeling a little bit lost. And I think by Wednesday, so that was the third day of class, we were kind of checking in around in my little circle group. And I started crying in my check-in, which is unusual for me too. But I was telling them how confused I was about what was happening in class, and that I didn't understand what anybody was saying, and why are we so intellectual, and where is the love and the spirit and, the life, and, what calls me into ministry. And they were right there with me. They were not trying to fix the problem, which was great. They had learned not to do that, but they offered up reflections of their own. And some said that, had I had another class before the class I took, which was on religious naturalism, maybe I wouldn't have felt so behind. But it continued, and I was really listening for how I felt in class. And I was struggling. Like, I was seriously thinking that I was going to have to find something else to do. And I didn't know what that was, because I'd already made this decision. And during class, one of the women who sat next to me is a dear, beautiful friend of mine who is now a minister. And she's from Cuba. She's a woman of color and very connected to a lot of the spirituality that I'm connected to. And on day 4, so I think it was Thursday in the afternoon, in my head, was running this thing: you don't belong here. And as it ran across my head in some kind of painful clarity, my friend slid this to me. She'd been working on it in class. You belong here. And I kind of laughed, like I laughed in my head, not out loud. I didn't want to disturb the class, but as that thought was running across my head, she had another story for me to hear. And thankfully I listened. Thankfully it came at that right exact moment, because I realized I can't just listen to what's in my head. I have to listen to what else is being said. And so that simple little note that came across to me when I was in a moment of despair just resurrected my hope. I do belong here. I belong here. And people see it. People know it. So I hope that you too, when you're in those moments of despair or feeling lost or wondering if you belong, and these are all painful feelings, that you listen for that resurrection of hope from wherever it might come from. May you find that peace. Blessed be.
All creatures have
So the staff was all discussing what flowers we were going to reference for this Sunday, because there's a lot of nature flower stuff in Easter. And there's a little bit of a disconnect here, and I want to just name it. For those who are still struggling right now, this disconnect may click for you. Unitarian Universalists love talking about flowers in Easter because it's the end of their difficult season. And by that, I mean the end of the winter. But here, it's the beginning of the difficult season, for me at least. I'm about to get stuck inside because it's going to be too hot to go outside. So for me, spring has always been sort of a time of dread a little bit. So I found a flower that I think matches this resurrection of hope idea. On Friday, I went to my parents' house for the first time in a year. They got vaccinated about a month ago, and so we actually went inside. You know, this has been the place that I would go for like the last 27 years, where I knew was sort of my home base where I could be safe. But for the last year, I couldn't be safe there. And so I just didn't go in. And so Friday was the first time in a year I got that taste of life without that sort of worrying fear of death. It was there. But it's still, the fear was still there just a little bit. I'm not fully processed on this, so I'm not preaching on it so much as to say, with this Easter as Advent thing, the hope is coming, but we have to wait. And so the flower that I thought that we should close with is, and it's maybe just because it's one of my favorite fruits, but the resurrection of hope that I see is this week. I was actually going to film this part, but they didn't show up until like Friday or Saturday. My satsuma tree is in bloom, and I can't cut the little bloom off because then I lose the fruit. The flower is not the hope. The flower is the promise that you will get fruit that will become the hope later on. We're almost there, but we're not there yet. So just stick with it. Just keep going. Let's be the church that makes the world healthier and better because we exist. Amen. There's that one line in the second verse that I can't stop hearing. Once again, the word comes true. So why do we have to do this every year? If the word comes true, just let it be true. But I need to be reminded, and you need to be reminded. So I'm going to turn to a benediction that I turn to all the time. It's one that's helped me through some of the hardest times. Take courage, friends. The way is often hard, the path is never clear, and the stakes are very high. Take courage, for deep down there is another truth. You are not alone. Amen. Go in peace. Happy Easter.